Just share.
Okay, so when we get to yours, I'll stop sharing and then you can take over.
Okay.
And I'll break us for any questions we have about SCLO.
Okay. Oh, you pronounce it perfectly.
Did I? Well, I probably
Yes.
heard it from you, Kathy. I don't know if I would have pronounced it correctly or spelled center correctly right off the bat.
They're just our people, and it doesn't bother me that much, but even if I teach them, it's pronounced slow. They keep going slow.
Oh,
You know, it's just
dedicated.
because that's what it looks like. So I get it, you know.
Sure. Afternoon, everybody. Well, morning in Idaho. I'm in Ohio.
Hello.
All right. Zoom's telling me that we still have some folks trickling in. Held at that hold screen for whatever reasons. The technology of Zoom is really such a black box to me. So I heard from probably half a dozen folks that they registered, had a conflict, but look forward to catching up afterwards with the replay, which is kind of the blessing in disguise with these webinars.
Yes.
All right, I think I can get us started officially and say welcome everybody to the second to last. If you want to press your friends, I think the word is penultimate monthly webinar hosted by the Idaho Commission for Libraries and led by us, Library Strategies Consulting Group. Most of you, I think, have met me. My name is David Katz. I'm Assistant Director of Programs and Services, coming to you from a new location, my hotel in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm at the Public Library Association Biannual Conference. So this is a nice little midday break for me. I'm joined today by two of the four principal consultants who are collaborating with ICFL on this months-long now library construction training curriculum. Because we also have some new faces and names with us in Zoom. In addition to you old friends, I will spare a moment here to introduce or reintroduce our speakers. Today we have Pamela Westby. She's been director at public libraries across Wisconsin and Minnesota for 30 plus years here, and now is very well reputed here in the Midwest library community. She's currently head of the Detroit Lakes Public Library in beautiful northern Minnesota. And we're joined by Kathy Alloway, who is a retired library director, most recently of the SCLO Center Regional Library out of State College, Pennsylvania, so named because it is home to the campus of Penn State. Retirement is, in Kathy's case, a bit of a misnomer because we here at Library Strategies keep her incredibly busy with her third act as a lead consultant here with Library Strategies. Both bring significant hands-on experience with construction projects, both as library administrators and as consultants now too. Since Pamela and Kathy are going to have their hands full presenting, I will play point on questions in their stead. So we welcome questions from you anytime. Simply drop them in the Zoom chat whenever they occur to you, and I'll read them out. What I think works best is if the questions you're positing are sort of context dependent, I'll interject to have them address it during the flow of the hour. Otherwise, we'll hold them till towards the end. And as a final housekeeping note, just a quick heads up that we may reference a few resources during this hour. We often do, so watch for an email after the fact, which will include those materials as well as the usual PDF of the slide deck, link to that replay and survey link to tell us what you thought about today. Kathy, want to go to slide 2 real quick? Thank you. Before I pass the reins to Kathy to introduce the first of this morning's 2 case studies, I just want to take a moment more to orient us within the larger planned curriculum that we're in the home stretch of now. This series started last October, and we've been covering the phases of a library construction project in sequential order, more or less. And we put a bow on that last month with a deep dive on moving and reopening considerations. A really fun and informative hour, if I do say so myself. And by the by, if you missed that, you can find all 6 of those previous talks and accompanying resources archived on ICFL's website. Now, by design, we're devoting our last 2 webinars here today and then on May 2nd to illustrative stories from the field that show in action all the principles and the practices that we've been covering with you. And today's focus is on renovations and redesigns, which is to say construction projects that stop short of a, building a whole new branch from scratch. But next and last, as a preview, I want to share that we have a modification to the original game plan. That's in response to broad, strong interest and feedback from you, our Idaho audience, in further discussion around fundraising and other financing topics. So funding will be the spotlight for webinar 8. If you were among those who has provided feedback along the way, thank you very much. And we hope you can join us next month for that 8th and concluding session in our series. We'll be sorry to see it end. But we're not there yet. So with that, I will happily pass the reins to Kathy.
So welcome, everyone. This is a picture of my workplace for an 11-year period, SCLO Center Region Library in State College, Pennsylvania. And today, you're going to get in my case study. I'm going to go first, and then Pamela's going to introduce a second case study. But mine comes from a different angle, and it's construction and renovation after a building disaster occurs that forces you into immediate action. Thinking long-term in a short-term crisis can often lead you to new effective space solutions. So just as a little background, SCLO is a 32,000 square foot building. It's a 2-story public library serving 5 municipalities in the State College, Pennsylvania region, which, as David said, we're a Big Ten college town in north central PA, home of Penn State University. So here's a little preview of what I'm going to go through. This is the story that I personally lived through in 2015 about building damage sustained in the polar vortex of 2015. And I'm going to also talk about its long-term effect. I'll briefly tell you the story, but I want to hit on these 5 areas: the damage, the assessment that we did, how we recovered, communications, and finances. I'll give you the top takeaways in those 5 areas. So my story begins President's Day, February 16th, 2015. We had been warned about extreme weather here in the eastern United States, and it was the second polar vortex of record-breaking cold in the same number of years. Our state college temperatures dropped to 0 the evening before the event, and at 2:30 a.m. it was 6 below, and as you can see on this graph, it got even colder as we were approaching sunrise. Well, this -6 temperature at 2:30 a.m. was the last straw for the SCLO Library fire suppression system. The liquid in the wet fire sprinkler system in the ceiling froze and burst the pipes, sending a cascade of water down 2 floors in a corner of the building. Heating pipes in the underground parking area were also malfunctioning. Now, before I get into those details, I want to say a few words about my state of mind. I was aroused from a deep sleep at 3 a.m. because the fire department got the malfunctioning fire alarm signal. Alpha Fire was first on the scene, and the Borough of State College Public Works staffer on duty was not far behind. You see, the Public Works Department has the contract for building maintenance and cleaning in the building. And you may have heard me on previous webinars advise you that if you're a public library, even if you've got your own maintenance and custodial staff, it's a great practice to make friends with the public works people in your municipality or the school district. They always have a deep bench of tools and talent that can help you through a crisis. Anyway, back to this cold morning. Luckily, my car started and I drove the 15 minutes to the library, and I was stunned by what I found at the library. Immediately getting into my office, I had to start calling key staff and vendors, but it was a holiday morning and I couldn't reach people. I had to draw on every skill to keep my cool and calm, but I do remain grateful to those who showed up first. And in the meantime, I couldn't help but sharing these pulp fiction, fictitious covers. Why does this always happen to me when I'm in charge, etc.? Because I'm telling you, you have to use all your deep breathing and meditation skills when you're faced with a disaster. And here's some photos of the damage that was done. There was very, very yucky water in the corner of these two floors. The water was yucky black because it was old sprinkler system water. It was encased in those pipes and had chemicals in it to avoid freezing that clearly didn't work. Then we had the sewers back up in the bathrooms because at the same time, the sewage pipes exiting the SCLO library, they got frozen and backed up. So sink waste couldn't move out of the building. I'm telling you, it did not smell good in the library. Here's a map to further orient you. Here's the top floor where the flooding occurred. We had our CDs there. Biography got hit and wiped out pretty bad. Fortunately, on the main floor, this was the closet area of our meeting room space, and all of the children's supplies in there were mostly plastic, so they were salvageable, but this was the part of the library that got hit. So the first stage was assessment, and the public works staff and vendors came in to assess the flooding damage. And again, as I said, we learned frozen pipes, which led to flooding and sewer backup. And we discovered that here in the underground parking garage area, there were these pipes that tried to keep that area pretty clear. They were getting frozen too, so they literally had to take a blowtorch to make sure that the pipes were clear. Then we immediately put some heat wrap around them. So here's the culprit. It was a frozen sprinkler head joint where the sprinkler had attached to the pipes. It just failed in the cold temperatures. And of course, it didn't work alone. There were other parts that misfailed. This incident sparked an external assessment of the event. We paid after the event for an engineering to come in and look at the sprinkler system. And lo and behold, they found that there were portions of the library ceiling that were missing crucial insulation needed for an event like the polar vortex. So right away, I thought to myself, maybe the insurance company is going to want to sue someone. The building was already 10 years old, and the involved insulation contractors and the general contractor were no longer in business. So we could not pursue any negligence charges. Fortunately, the insurance company helped pay for almost everything, but I will tell you now that the insulation issues continue to haunt the library. Additional flooding occurred in 2022, and they had another flooding event yesterday at the library. And these are all trickle-down effects from poor construction in the roof area and nearby construction projects that have caused vibrations that we believe are affecting the piping of the building. So when you have a crisis, you not only have to remediate in the short term, but think about consequences for the long term of your facility. So the next step was assessment, and here's some pictures of the flooding. Those were the CDs. This is a picture of later flooding that occurred. But building projects can create renovation possibilities. After this flood, we did get rid of our circulating music CD collection. It was minimal to begin with. And as some of you may know, the checkout of CDs, spoken or musical in libraries, has gone down in an era of streaming media. So it's time for us to get rid of these and turn this into a lower risk seating area that could withstand any future flooding. So in the recovery phase of this disaster, of course, we had to close the library. It was closed for a 2-week period. and staff and trusted volunteers had to help with cleanup chores. Most of the books in the biography area were damaged by the black water. And I do want to note to you that we had to take precautions at the dumpsters that we filled because there are always members of the public that won't accept that a book, even if it's yucky and moldy, has to be thrown away. So we tossed these books with the greatest of discretion because we didn't want to upset any members of the public or invite inquiry. We did hire a cleanup company, Service Master, the local franchise of that national company. They did a great job for us and brought in these super huge dryers. They also helped us lift up the shelving on that second floor in the biography area because when SCLO was built, and that occurred before I became director, they laid the shelving right over the carpeting, but we raised the shelving so that those dryers could dry things underneath. And I am pleased to say that these fans ran 24/7 for at least a week, but it did the trick to my amazement, and we had no mold issues after this flood. But I will tell you that the collection needed weeding. You know that in other webinars too, we have talked about renovations. It's a great time to weed your collection. And this actually forced a much needed drastic weeding of the biography section. I'm happy to tell you that after all that weeding, we had higher checkouts of biographies after the event. So as we've said before, weed, weed, weed as part of your construction projects. Another thing that happened, I don't have a picture of this, but we owed a big thanks to Penn State University, which sent over a huge truck full of extra book trucks, which we sorely needed at the time. Now, of course, the flooding of a beloved public library is a big newsworthy item, and you can see here on the top that the local TV station covered what had happened. But here are some quotes from some of the numerous emails that I received from the public, either directly or on Facebook. The vast majority were from people, even before we made an appeal, started sending in money to replace lost books. These folks didn't even realize that insurance was going to cover a lot of the costs. But anyway, it was wonderful. But then I also got these emails like these comments like, how did we have a wet sprinkler system and why weren't we keeping better care of the building? Well, I want to tell you that during the polar vortex, there were buildings all over town, including at Penn State, that had major issues with frozen pipes. But anyway, when you have a disaster like this, you want to be on top of communications. You want to be urgent. You want to be out there first. You want to be transparent about what has happened, and you want to be honest with the staff, patrons, media, and elected officials. If you are in a smaller library, the director should be the spokesperson, or if you're the director and you're too busy managing the crisis, make sure that you designate a board member or a higher level staff person that will act as spokesperson with the media and any kind of inquiries that come in. And photos, photos, photos. You can't take enough of them, not only for communications, but for the insurance companies as well. By the way, I want to answer this question. Again, I was not director when SCLO was built, but at the time of its building in 2005, a wet sprinkler system was the best and most cost-effective thing that the library could have put in to meet code. There are pros and cons to wet versus dry sprinkler systems. This is what they went with. This is what happened. When you're in the middle of a crisis, you want to keep track of every gain and loss, including staff time. Remember that in a building malfunction, you are likely to pursue an insurance claim or grants as well as donations for repairs. You want to look at all your vendor and replacement costs, so get a spreadsheet going as soon as possible. I will tell you that library materials are subject to depreciation. We did not get full replacement refunds for those lost books and media that were in the music and the biography area, but we did end up breaking even because the insurance payment and the donations pretty much matched what we needed to spend on the event. Interestingly, too, the insurance company asked for lost income during the period. So we were closed for 2 weeks and we were able to estimate the amount of lost overdue fine income because we waived fines because we were closed, our lost book sale income from the period, etc. It didn't amount to a lot. I think it was about $7,000, but every penny counts. It does help during and after the event to give the heroes public recognition. Things would have been a lot worse without these fine people. This is DJ Lilly, SCLO's administrative assistant, Karen Lutz of our janitorial squad from the Borough of State College Public Works Department, and Tom Brown, who was our maintenance man at the time, again with the State College Public Works Department. They were just an enormous help in getting us through a very, very difficult time. In the end, I can tell you that this crisis, again, to repeat, led us to an overall assessment with an engineering firm of what caused it. We remediated some of the problems. We updated our long-term capital finance projections. It also led to a reconfiguration of the corner that makes it less risky in case another flood occurs. So these are all of the kind of things that can come out of a natural disaster like this. So I covered the story, the damage that occurred, how we assessed things, how we recovered, tips for communications and finances. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to take them right now, but you can always find a silver lining if there is damage that is done to your building. Any questions, David?
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, in fact, we do. The first one I will ask, just because it certainly feels the most timely, is you had a passing mention there of some additional troubles yesterday. What's known?
Well, this time it was not freezing pipes, but they got water in the elevator shafts. We have had 2 days in this area of intense rain. Between 2 and 3 inches have fallen in the area. So clearly something's been happening on SCLO's flat roof that caused water to leak into the elevator shaft. So SCLO has just been beset by water problems. This time, the current director believes that it has something to do with the flat roof, which is probably going to need an additional inspection to discover how things got into the building.
That's no fun. One of those
Glad
moments
I'm retired. Glad I'm retired.
I was just going to say one of those moments where I'm glad you don't feel in the hot seat anymore. Another question was, you'd mentioned depreciation there with the print materials and the multimedia materials. I think the gist of the question is if depreciation was a factor in recovering costs for fixtures and furnishings and the other library interiors.
No, there was not, because not that many furnishings were destroyed. That CD holder was ancient, and we decided to get rid of that collection anyway. The shelving was steel and endured the flood. We didn't have to replace the carpeting, so we were very fortunate. Now, we used the Borough of State College to purchase our insurance. And what do they call them? The purchasing director for the
Like
Borough of State
procurement.
College helped us with insurance, and he was assisting with depreciation too. You know that you can buy insurance, but it's much more expensive. That in the event of a catastrophe gives you full replacement costs. That is usually not advised for government agencies, but again, at the end, the insurance pretty much covered everything that we lost, and some donations made up the difference. So we had a relatively high replacement cost threshold, and I always trusted this purchasing agent to purchase the right kind of insurance for us, and he did. So I know that doesn't completely answer the question. what I advise is whatever your insurance policy is, look up what the replacement value threshold is. And every year they had a blanket cost for the depreciation of our collection based on how many new materials we added that year and how many old ones we withdrew. So they actually use the same figures you report in your annual report. How many new things did you add to the collection? How many did you withdraw? And he and the insurance company would come up with a new sort of depreciation schedule for the collection.
I'm taking a literal note on that, and I'm probably not the only one. And actually, that discussion of insurance crosswalks pretty well to the next question. We have this and one more, and then we'll pivot to Pamela. This question was, Kathy, you'd mentioned there that ultimately the pursuit of negligence charges from various contractors, vendors was moot because they were out of business. But in terms of hunting down to get that far, did you have assistance from the jurisdiction you're in or from the insurance company in finding the paperwork and sort of insofar as pursuing negligence damages, etc.? Did you have to do that on your own or did you have help?
I did that on my own, and the insurance company had so many claims from the polar vortex that they apparently decided not to go full tilt into investigating any possible negligence in replacing that insulation. And I think it was also daunting to them that the company no longer existed. And by the way, I know it sounds like when I say that, oh my, they must have used fly-by-night companies. But that happens in the construction industry, smaller companies get gobbled up by big ones. So again, so many places were damaged in that highly unusual weather event that insurance companies got really selective about negligence pursuits and only went after the ones that in which it was astonishingly clear. So in our case, they didn't go whole hog into it. I did. And I also know the architect and I'm actually friends with him and discuss things with him too. The other thing we realized was that in parts of the roof, they used that blow-in insulation. There's all kinds of insulation that can be put into commercial buildings. And it's very possible that over time, as the building shook and, various things happened, that insulation redistributed itself. So it could have been fine when the building was inspected and the code guys were there. But over the course of 10 years, some of the insulation shifted a little, went into places where it shouldn't have. And that's how this happened. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does, yes. This last question for you, Kathy. Again, I hope I'm interpreting correctly. It just says COOP plan question mark, but I believe it's in reference to continuing of operations plans, which is a term that I think has seen a lot of traction post-COVID after so many libraries have gone into lockdown. So what I think they're asking is if the library or the district had sort of a fallback plan for the case of emergency, and if there wasn't such a thing, such guideposts then, if there's something like that now.
No, I think we just took each crisis as it occurred. It did allow us to update our emergency procedure manuals. And now that I think about it, I think we might have opened the children's department and the checkout desk on the main floor before we allowed people upstairs. So we might have had a half opening where, the building was closed for an entire week so that the staff could devote their resources. And then maybe week 2, we opened up the checkout desk and the children's department, which was not affected. We allowed people to pick up reserves and to go into the children's room. So you have to, play each case as it goes. But there is an emergency procedures manual that exists and was updated after this crisis occurred.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Anne, for the question. If I misconstrued it, you can let us know and we can circle back. But with that, we're right at time and a good opportunity to pivot to you, Pamela.
Great. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on what your time frame is. I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to introduce the presentation here with our highlights here, the introduction of the case study. We're going to talk a little bit about the facts and input and timing and right sizing of the project that I'm speaking about today, and what this project was built on, the design principles: connection, access, economy, resources, and well-being. We'll review how working with the community to receive feedback informs the project scope in meaningful ways, and we learn how architects can help assess pros and cons of schemes in efforts to define a building project scope that not only meets, but exceeds the needs while maximizing resources. Thank you. So the introduction of the case study, the Ellie Phillips Memorial Public Library was built in 1976 on a site next to the Eau Claire River in downtown Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This picture on the left was one that I took just days before the lockdown. I drove up to the library. We hadn't opened yet, and all of these people were waiting outside. So Eau Claire Public Library is a very busy library. 1,000 people come through the doors. This was before the renovation. I'm sure it's much more now. But the 3-story building had a tight column grid and low floor to ceiling heights, few windows, and limited room for growth. By 2016, the major building systems needed to be replaced. The roof was leaking, carpets and wall coverings were worn. There was no space to expand or renovate very easily. And there was new leadership. I came on board in 2016, and then as the library director, and there was an adopted 5-year strategic plan with the idea of renovation expansion project was not in that strategic plan. However, as we started piecing together our assessments of the building, that project was birthed. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So we're going to take a look at the comprehensive analysis that we did to renovate and expand this building. This slide presentation will discuss how to establish defensible priorities that inform a responsible project scope. Library leadership will need to determine which of these following that you need to do so, but for Eau Claire, all 4 studies were conducted, and the information gleaned to navigate the difficult political environment that we were in and the community landscape needed to be tweaked enough or convinced enough to garner community-wide support. So the first one is the building feasibility study. This study was done as part of, this study was done as part of the city's effort to examine all city-owned facilities and determine priorities. The results did show that the library was one of the top facilities with urgent needs. However, other facilities were chosen over the library, and therefore we felt like we needed to do more research. So along came facility and site assessment managed report. So bringing in another vendor, and this one detailed the inventory of all the building systems, documented the age, the condition, the servicing needs, the replacement dates, predicted replacement dates, and estimated the cost. This was a critical piece. This one demonstrated the sense of urgency that we needed to communicate. Using bar graphs and charts, we were able to show how the end-of-life systems would cost in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The building feasibility space needs analysis was conducted by an architectural firm and included not only the condition of the library, but an emphasis on reimagining your library. So in this case, we used community feedback listening sessions. We surveyed people, we had focus groups. We did comparative analysis of the current services using a tool by the Department of Public Instruction called the Wisconsin Public Library Standards for Access and Facilities. And this provides a rubric for expectations based on service population size. So that was also helpful. Then we also asked for additional scenarios on using the space. So the first one was no additional space, but just a redesign. The second one was a redesign with additional space. And the third was a complete rebuild. So in other words, finding another place or tearing down what existed. That really helped inform the design team, the staff, and the library board, everyone involved in the efforts. Then we knew what our options were at that point. And so we needed to know what could the city do for us and how much money did we need to raise to fill that gap. So we did a campaign readiness study, and that was involved determining library supporter base on their desire and their ability to contribute to a campaign. It involved interviews, data mining, surveys, and focus groups. It involved these one-on-one interviews and having people actually put their finger on a price range where they felt like they could give. All right, we can go to the next slide now. Thank you. So now we have the information that we were looking at, and I think, Kathy, do you want me to take over the screen here?
Sure. I stopped share.
Great. No.
Good, I can see it.
Okay. Thank you. I am not seeing it.
I think you were in the right tab, Pamela.
Okay.
You just needed to press present.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Here we go.
Then I think you can click ahead with the right arrow on your keyboard.
All right. So, then the timing was the next option that we needed to address. We had our sense of urgency, but we knew that the building costs were rising. The building was only getting older by the minute. And as usual, the state of the economy was in flux, funding cuts at all levels, federal, state, county, and municipal levels. But we did have community support. We did, we were aware of the competition for fundraising. But what made our project so different is that we were looking to be innovative. We had been active and engaged with our community, and we were active collaborators in the community. So we started to make a list of all of our community partners, and it was amazing to see how many people, public libraries, or how many organizations that public libraries collaborate with. So if you, that's a tip I would say would really help you, is if you could put that in a spreadsheet and find out how many folks are you partnering with or collaborating with. Rising building costs and aging library buildings with systems often at the end of their useful life creates a tension between the need of a fully refreshed staff and customer experience and resetting critical systems for the building's longevity. So that brings us to the idea of right sizing. With building projects, bigger isn't always better. This was the possible case study that we needed to communicate to our community. The library renovation and addition project illustrates how concept phase helps the library organize, prioritize needs, and reset the building for decades of service. You can see the before picture here on the right during COVID times, the paneling, and that's going to come into play later on in our slideshow. So keep that in mind. We determined, along with the design team and lots of community input, design principles of needing more connection with the community and more access, more diversity. We needed to keep it affordable. So economy was also a design principle. Resources, making our resources more available and reusing what we had. So instead of tearing that building down, we felt that renovating was the most green and the most responsible way to treat that building. And then lastly, since we were in the middle of COVID, we're going into COVID, well-being was also a design principle for us. So in order to strengthen the connections, the group felt that we needed to look at the very high level of what connections meant. Although the existing building is located between the Eau Claire River and downtown, visual connections between these civic amenities and the library were very minimal. Upon approaching the building from the entry plaza, a lack of windows prevented visual access to the activities inside the library, and from the interior, views to the downtown and the river were also scarce. Low ceilings, tall shelves, and a stairs tucked out of sight made for dark interiors and difficult wayfinding. So our solution was a community plaza, a view of the river, and a rooftop addition providing city views. So here you can see the original building up in the left-hand corner, which was taken shortly before the renovation was really just getting kicked off. And the other colored pictures here are showing the finished product. So strengthening connections, although the existing building was located there, we were able to build on those, the community plaza with the river and the outdoors looking in. The plaza provides an invitation and bridges the second floor with our staircase that was moved from the center of the building to the side. So that's that was one of those flexibilities that allowed us more visual views across the main floor. And the rooftop provides city views. The library's geothermal well field sits below the plaza out in front in the public plaza, and the expanded entry provides space for gatherings, a sculpture promenade, and improvised accessibility. The design includes future plans to extend the plaza south into a full block city park. The rooftop addition perches above the existing building. If you can probably see this darker, that's the addition on the third floor. The new windows and the masonry facade showcase activity happening inside the library to entice community members to come inside. There's plentiful gathering spaces, and a native planting help create a welcoming visual for people to come in and explore. The other principle of access, I want to talk a little bit about the COVID pandemic that forced early design and planning to be fully remote. So we needed to pivot and included community engagement and outreach, but we needed to do it differently. So the design team got to work, developing a series of methods to best reach the public remotely, including mail-in postcards, online video submissions, surveys offered in multiple local languages. This approach enabled the design team to connect with a broader section of the community than they have been able to reach using more conventional engagement methods. Through those input sessions, we received numerous new space ideas and service ideas that help provide us with a clear direction in renovating the building. The Dabble Box, which is what some would call a makerspace, and the Innovation Lab provide access to specialized technology, a teaching kitchen, equipment, and art equipment to support STEM-based education and nutrition literacy. And here's a picture of that Dabble Box. And you can see here, this was a meeting space on the lower level. And just really making use of the tall windows. On the bottom picture, you can see that the tall windows to an outdoor plaza, just a small one there, and a drive-through book drop. This is the makerspace, but it's also used as just drop-in, bring your craft and do something together. There's 3D printers and many more specialized equipment. The top picture shows the storage units where that equipment can be stored. So designing for economy, the initial plan included a 41,000 square foot addition, which was beyond the library's project budget. In the midst of facing all the obstacles of a pandemic and political unrest, we now face the very difficult decision of how to move forward. Through careful planning and programming, the team and library leadership right-sized the addition to that 6,700 square feet, while still meeting the library's aspirations and goals. No extras. We gauged the upfront costs and ongoing costs, looking for flexible spaces to meet the goals and aspirations. So here is the Innovation Lab with a demonstration kitchen and just flexible space. So without compromising the integrity of our goals or the quality we envisioned, we began to look at the creative use of spaces and careful examination of our priorities. Flexible, multi-use spaces for library programs support a building that is bustling with activity all hours of the day, minimizing spaces that sit empty with infrequent use. And one good example is storytime rooms are now, it's not just a storytime room, it's being used at all times of the day. People can pop in and just sit and read with their child. I'm just really trying to use every inch of the space. Now, the Innovation Lab also supports cooking lessons, science experiments, group meetings, and event catering. And then also the art gallery, which we'll see later, doubles as an event space, and the Dabble Box hosts art crafts and technology programs, as well as the drop-in activities. So I wanted to share this with you a little bit so you get an idea of how this addition was done. So you can see where the additional space was added on this massing picture here. The interior program really directed that rooftop addition massing in an effort to build on what we needed and nothing more. So the roof pops up where tall ceilings are needed and tucks down where the lower heights are adequate. So energy and daylight modeling helped inform the use of our need for airflow in the building as well. I think I talked about that in an earlier webinar. And here's a picture just showing the end product. We had low ceilings, the tall shelves, and few windows. It was dark and uninviting. By raising the ceiling heights, lowering shelf heights, and new windows and skylights draw daylight into the library. The daylight modeling informed the placements of the windows and the skylights in the rooftop addition. Also designing for resources and access to our materials. Reusing the existing concrete building structure and masonry walls. The new interior palette exposes that existing masonry and concrete floor slabs, and also repurposed oak paneling from the original board meeting for the wall paneling in the public areas. So you can see a little bit of it here in the background of the larger picture, and the picture on the left is the before picture. So I'm just going to go back a slide once. So you see the wood that was repurposed wood from the original building. All right, so here's the third floor. And we're looking with a view from the top of the staircase. In the middle, you can see the well-lit art gallery and the Innovation Lab on the left with the green back wall. That large community room is on the right. And if you look closely, you can see a glass door at the back of that community room, and that leads out to the outdoor terrace, which will appear on the next slide. And that project also supports good health and well-being through interior finishes throughout the building, and the furniture avoid chemicals of concern on the Living Building Challenges read list. So that's another thing to consider when you're doing your renovations or rebuilds. is how can we be really conscious and very intentional about keeping our buildings healthy and clean for our those who visit the library and those who work there. So in the end, this project one acclimates not only through the state, but otherwise. And I just love this quote that the renovated library serves as the heart of the city. This was also followed by creating a link to the Eau Claire River, downtown civic facilities, and meeting the community's goals of promoting lifelong learning, creating collaborative spaces, and supporting open access of diverse resources. And that was written in Business Magazine by Joe Van Dan Plas. So I just really am excited to hear if you have any other questions for me about the project. And I want to thank you for tuning in today.
Thank you, Pamela. That was great. And yes, in fact, we do. The first question, a softball, I think. On your first or second slide, you had a term, a 3-story tight column grid. And the question was, what does tight column mean in an architect's context?
Sure. So this building was, it's a post-tension concrete building, meaning if you're familiar with concrete having a rod going through it to support the concrete from cracking, well, post-tension is even more reliable in preventing those cracks. So the entire building was constructed with this post-tension concrete slabs, and that meant for a very heavy floors. And so there were columns, very large columns supporting the second floor and that third floor. So the building was actually built to be able to add a third floor. And so as we went into this design, that's why we were planning for the full expansion of that third floor. But then, you know, Goldilocks couldn't have the large chair. So she had to right size and had to compromise and do a partial expansion. So that's kind of a long answer for your question about that column, but those columns were placed pretty closely. And every time we wanted to make a change or a modification to the floor, it had to be x-rayed so that we didn't hit one of those rods, those post-tension rods, and compromise the structure. That makes sense.
Yes, yes, you sound like so many of the directors I know who have come out of a construction project and are sort of ersatz architects who can speak some of the lingo,
Yeah,
just
right.
being steeped in that space for so long.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of sort of those third-party professionals, this question was, you mentioned the feasibility and readiness studies that were part and parcel to your project.
Yes.
And which of course we've covered in this kind of longer curriculum here. And the question was if you got assistance from DPI or from paid consultants, or if you kind of plowed ahead just with your staff resources.
Yeah, so we did hire a consultant, and that I would strongly encourage you to consider a consultant. Oftentimes they use a rubrics like a percentage of your goal. So, you know, nothing lost, nothing, you know, by jumping in with that. Library Strategies is, of course, I want to give them a a big shout out for, for one, vendor to reach out to, but, as librarians, we're often timid to put ourselves out there, but we are the ones who can answer the questions. We are the ones who feel passionate. We live it with every day in our sleep and in our waking hours. Libraries are, is our love. And so you really are the one who can communicate that, but support is so critical to get your message right, to get the facts, to know who to contact, and to put all of that into place. So yeah, it's not a single person job, that's for sure.
Right. Thank you for that answer. And for the plug for library strategies, by the way.
Yeah,
I wasn't
of course.
fishing, but
Of course.
you're right. We do feasibility studies.
Yes.
The last question, and I'm so happy that we're essentially right on time. So that's a testament, Kathy and Pamela, to your preparation, that you really right-size your content here.
Yeah.
But don't want to give short shrift to this last question, which is, you said something in passing there, Pamela, that I'm sure is relatable for a lot of us. And that was that in Eau Claire, at this moment in time, there was competition for fundraising. And wondered if you could share a bit about that background and some of the players, competitors, maybe.
Sure. So I think the number one was the building feasibility study was the first one was conducted by the city because they also had buildings and historic, interesting story actually. The city hall was the original library Carnegie building and had been added on to. And they wanted to bring back some of the historic pieces, but also just add on to it too. So they were competing with us, which is very difficult if your city administration is competing with you. The hockey facility, the Children's Museum was also kicking off, the YMCA. It was, and there was a tennis complex with the local clinic, hospital, had a kind of a trifecta health facility that they were proposing. And also the university was looking to redo their science division building. So there were a lot, and we came to the conclusion that there will always be a project to compete with. And there was, and the big one was the arts facility hadn't earned all of their money. They hadn't raised all their money, but they went ahead and built anyway. So it was a fine arts, the Pablo Center. And so they had done a campaign to help finish the project. So there was a lot going on, but we knew there was a lot of library love, and it wasn't necessarily the same people. And I think that's my advice to you is find out if your library lovers would still give to you, even though these other campaigns were going on, because you can't assume that they would give to the Children's Museum or whatever, historic city hall. I mean, these are very different projects, and people have very different hearts and different feelings. And that's really what it comes back to, is heart and feeling. yeah, I mean, there's the practical side of, yes, can I afford to give you 200,000? But it's also, you know, I remember this and that about my library, and I love
Well said.
seeing,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Right. Not all funders are cut from the same cloth, or donors, I should say. And also, as you say, there's always going to be some manner of competition. So it's folly to wait your turn. Very well said, Pamela. And if I may say, the upshot now for Eau Claire is that you have a phenomenal library and a beautiful children's museum too, to the point where my 7-year-old insists on driving 45 minutes to Eau Claire versus going, you know, just down the street to St. Paul's, larger, but not as good children's museum. Anyway, this is wonderful in that we're at time, but we've gotten to everybody's questions. So sort of my ideal, that is great. I believe we have one more slide, just teeing up the, am I correct? Teeing up the next webinar?
Yes.
Yes, the very easy to remember URL. So if you haven't already, we hope you will register and join us. As you probably gleaned just from hearing about SCLO and Eau Claire, and know from your own local work, anytime there's construction, there is a funding story underpinning it. So we had no difficulty at all in pivoting and answering your call for case studies, stories that really spotlight the fundraising aspects of library construction. I already mentioned at the top of the hour that you'll get a follow-up email from us just to bookend things. But with that, I'll say thank you to everybody here, especially to Pamela and Kathy for leading us. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.